Hello, welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is Kirsty Darkins, who's a commercial property investor and mentor. Welcome to you, Kirsty.
Thank you.
Joining Kirsty is Bobbie Jethwa, CEO and Director of UK Property Agents. Welcome to you, Bobbie.
Thank you.
Hope you both had a good journey in. I think you had to come the furthest, didn't you?
Yeah, down from Birmingham, but it was all good.
Oh, well done. Trains running well?
Yeah, well, we did that last night just in case.
Just in case. Good. Well done. Well, good to have you both here. Kirsty, your first question is this. I believe that with an impending recession coming, if not already here, the time might be ideal for investing in property. I'm torn, though, between investing in perhaps commercial property or residential. Can the panel give me any guidance on the pros and cons of both, please? That's your subject, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a big subject. But what I would say is, so I'll start with residential, which is more familiar to a lot of people. And the pros of investing in residential are capital appreciation, particularly in the south and southeast. So easy capital appreciation, just really market led. There's not very much
you're going to get told off like I do for being too London or South East centric.
Well, I shouldn't be, because I do invest in the Midlands, so I won't be. Also, low capital investment to get into residential property investment. So you need a deposit and then you can finance the rest because your value is based on the bricks and mortar value of the property.
Sure.
And data and information is readily available for analysing your residential property investments. So you can get all your house prices and your rental data really easily on all the big portals and from the agents. Some of the downsides of investing in residential property are managing the tenants. So it's all to do with hands-on management. It's a lot of work owning residential property, or you have to pay other people quite a lot of your profit to manage it for you. So, there's over 50 boxes you have to tick in terms of compliance and health and safety and maintenance for residential tenants. So that's a big part of the downside. You lose some time freedom, you lose some profit, I would say. Commercial, so some of the pros of investing in commercial is the opposite of what I just said about residential. So it's hands-off in terms of tenants management. The tenants are responsible for everything in terms of maintenance and compliance, and they pay for everything. So your gross rent is your net rent in commercial property. You can invest your pension directly into commercial property, which you can't into residential. And there are some tax advantages of investing in commercial property as well. You also tend to find higher cash flowing, higher yielding properties. So you need fewer commercial properties to achieve the same rental income as you would.
And what about the funding opportunities? Are they similar in residential and commercial, or do you need more or less of a deposit in commercial?
Yeah, it depends in commercial. If you're investing in tenanted cash flowing investments for income, then you can do the same deposit and finance, but you will need a higher deposit, so 30% minimum in commercial. If you're buying a vacant commercial property though, or a property with very short leases, you can't raise finance against that because the income stream isn't secure, so you have to buy cash, and that's how you add your value.
Okay. I suppose then it's a little sort of closer or akin to the buy-to-let financing. They tend to look at just the income stream rather than you. Would you say that, say, for a first-time investor, would you give the same advice for somebody going in for the first time into commercial? Or would you say that residential would be an easier access point?
I think it depends on what capital you've got available and what your knowledge base is. But if you've never invested in property before, I would say that residential is a simpler, easier place to start.
Yeah. Although getting more complicated by the year, isn't it, with the legislation and everything else? I'm not sure that the government should be interfering in the way it does, but it does. So
and that's a good point actually, because they don't interfere in commercial in that way, because they need business to invest and to grow, and therefore they leave us alone as commercial landlords. So we have a much easier time.
There's a plus side to everything, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
What do you think, Bobbie? Do you concur with that?
Yeah, I think Kirsty makes very good, valid points there, actually. So, yeah, I think commercial is the way to go, when you're seasoned in investment, I think that's definitely the way to go.
Well, certainly the government is trying to do away with what they, I don't know why, call the sort of accidental investor.
Yeah.
They seem to want the bigger institutions investing in residential, don't they?
Yeah.
I suppose that's for ease of tax collection more than anything else, but it probably would serve to also self-regulate the industry to a degree. I mean, I've always been a bit concerned. I mean, Kirsty made the point about having to give a lot away to management in residential. I know that's particularly one of your fortes, but
Absolutely.
not all management companies are particularly good. I mean, we hear a lot of horror stories here, but if you can get good management, it's good news, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a win-win.
Because that's what makes you profit at the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that then. So, Bobbie, your first question. I'm a small buy-to-let investor and I see a lot of press about rental guarantee schemes. Are these really what they seem to be? And can the panel explain how these work, please?
Yeah, I think rent guarantee is a way for people to sort of take the back seat in their investment. So I think as general, there's a vast amount of companies out there that offer this service, and they, it's a form of having a set income each and every month without having the hassle of chasing tenants for rent areas, and also with evictions and things like this that can also take a massive toll on a hands-on landlord or an investor having to deal with those kind of issues, where if you have a rent guarantee company that takes care of the rent for you on your behalf, I think that's the way forward. But of course there's going to be less rent than what you'd get on your private sector or on the traditional rental.
Do we need to look carefully at the definition of rental guarantee? I mean, could you define the difference between, shall we say, a let-to-let scheme, which is really, if I can put it in simple terms, and you put me right when I get it wrong, but so let's say an agency would offer a let-to-let scheme. What you're doing is letting your property to that agency rather than to a succession of individuals. Okay, fine, that's all right. You could deem that as being guaranteed because you're dealing with a stronger company.
Correct.
And one company, and the responsibility for filling those properties remains theirs, not yours. I understand that. Or where you do get certain insurance companies offering to actually guarantee the rent that you've contracted for. Have I got the difference about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're spot on there, Stephen. What it is so the rent guarantee company will take the burden of the rental. Mm-hmm. The investor would ensure that he gets the rental every month, as long as the company, they have to do their due diligence because there is quite a lot of companies that now offering rent guarantee. You've got to make sure how strong that company is before you enter into those agreements. You've got to make sure that the lease that they prepare is it's beneficial for yourself and for them. It's fair. Maybe get lawyers' advice if you need to before you enter in, because most of them will be between 3 to 5 year leases.
Well, that's good news in itself, isn't it? It gives you a bit of security over a longer period
Well,
of
absolutely,
time.
because you can't, no rent guarantee company can actually give a 12-month tenancy. It's just impossible, because you'd have to, if you wanted your property back, how you're going to get the tenant out and reinstate the property in the condition that the rent guarantee company originally got it. So
on that point of sort of cost, I suppose, you've got the trade-off, haven't you? You've perhaps got a longer tenancy, you've got a regular rent coming in without question. Whether you have tenants in there, not your issue, not your problem. That belongs to the guarantor, doesn't it?
Exactly.
In whatever form they are. But so when you're doing your sums as a buy-to-let investor, you're going to say, right, I've got a rental coming in. I'm going to allow for some voids, which you wouldn't have to do in this case. But on top of that, you're going to add on your agency sort of letting fees and your management fees, which might come to probably, I think in London certainly, I don't know what they are up in Birmingham, but it's certainly in London, probably be about 15%, I think, wouldn't it? So if you save that and you go with a rental guarantee scheme, are you going to look at 15% less income as opposed to having to add it on to your business plan? Is that the kind of discount, or is it more?
I think it's maybe around that amount, I would say.
So
maybe
15 to 20%.
15 to 20% I would say, anything from there. But then also the biggest kicker is obviously when you want the property back. That's the biggest cost, because then you need to serve the notices in time. If you don't do this, then you need a lawyer to do it. So that incurs costs. And then loss of rent while you're doing the evictions. If you're not with a rent guarantee company, then that can be a massive.
I'm thinking the adding bonus here for perhaps a new investor in particular is the fact that you can actually sort of sit back and watch it happen and learn quite a lot. I would have thought. What do you think, Kirsty? The last 30 seconds, do you think there's anything?
Yeah, I think if you're time poor, it's a good option, as long as you do your sums and you've factored in the cost.
Yeah.
So in Birmingham, I would say it's more between 8 and 12% rather than the 15% that you might have down here.
Well, that's because everything's so expensive down here,
Yes.
isn't it? Okay. Well, look, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Kirsty and Bobbie more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by Kirsty Darkins and Bobbie Jethwa. Welcome back, guys. So, Kirsty, your question. How do the panel view the prospects of the high street, which we know has had difficulties in recent times? It seems that rents are lowering and there's talk of assistance with business rates. So, is this a good time to invest or not?
The short answer is it depends on the high street. So no two high streets are the same. It's very location specific. There are high streets that are absolutely thriving and always will be, and there are high streets that need totally repurposing. So you've got to be sure which kind of high street you're looking at. But if you're looking at a sustainable location, so there's not much vacancy, you've got a good mix of tenants, a mix of brands and independents, some investment by the local council and developers, there is actually a lot of opportunity in the high street right now, and it's evolving as it always has. So I've worked professionally and as an investor in high street investment for over 20 years. And lots of people have told me it's dying or it's dead during that 20 years, but I'm still investing in it. And that, I guess, is...
Well, I think that's a very positive attitude, and it's one that's needed. We get too much doom and gloom, don't we, around? I mean, I can remember sort of 25 years ago, they were building... the shopping centre at Canada Water over the road there. Sir Terence Conran designed it, and everybody was saying, "Oh, it'll never work. It'll never work." And it's one of the highest grossing, places in London at the moment. But when they say, "Oh, it's never going to work," what do they mean? They're going to pull it down and scrap it? I don't know, but it's so negative sometimes. But I think one of the interesting things about the high street, there's been a lot of advice and suggestions that maybe the usage should be split between retail and residential. I'm not quite so sure about putting residential into high streets. Nice idea, more for diversity, but I have this feeling that in probably 5 years' time, when retail and everything else has recovered from COVID and everything else that we're going through, people are going to say, hold on a minute, I don't want to live here, there's no infrastructure, residential's taking where the shops should be. I used to like to go into Boots or whatever, So I think it's going to come back and bite somebody somewhere unpleasant if we're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, as do a lot of commercial investors, that a mix of uses is the sustainable answer for the future of our high streets. Now that mix depends again on location. So some high streets work really well with residential above the commercial, and that can be a really nice diversified way to invest. But also the planning uses have relaxed, which means that you can have a shop, healthcare, offices, a restaurant, all under the same planning use class, which means you've got a really broad spectrum of tenants to draw from.
So it sort of goes from A to D now, does it?
It does, yeah, basically. So you've got a really broad spectrum of tenants to draw from. And your original question was, included a reference to rents are lower, business rates, there's some help coming there. Well, yes, business rates are a reflection of market rent at a point in time. They've been revalued, which gets implemented next year. So now is a really good time to be looking at the high street, because the rents are the realistic rents for the high street. So they are at their bottom, and also business rates are about to go down, which means for tenants, the properties are more affordable.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the good things that came out of COVID was a couple of points on commercial property in particular. One, people tell me that it's caused much better dialogue between landlord and tenant. There's much more communication and engagement, and that no longer are the institutional landlords so rigid about their classifications of tenant. They realise that there's got to be diversification, there's got to be a spread of both ability and affordability to make it work. So I think you're probably on a winner there, Kirsty, aren't you?
Well, hope so.
So too. What do you think, Bobbie?
Yeah, I agree with everything Kirsty said. I mean, yeah, it is now, depends on the high street. It just depends on where the location is. You can't just, obviously, Oxford Street, you're not going to put a residential there, are you? So, no. I mean, yeah, well, so it does depend on the high street, it really does.
Having said that, centre point's gone up at the end of New Oxford Street, hasn't it? And,
absolutely, so,
very successful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is about the type of tenants. So it needs to be convenience and service led. We like to call it Amazon proof. So the things that you can't just go out and buy on Amazon. So you can't get your hair done, your eyes tested, your pharmacy services, all of that. That's all. We'll always need all of those services.
But isn't the contradiction that Amazon are now opening shops? I mean, we've got one.
They are.
We've got one down here that makes you feel like you're shoplifting, because it just photographs you as you go round and you walk out.
Yeah, and that's because they've realised that a lot of us want the physical experience as well as the online experience, and so all the time the high street evolves with us as we make decisions about how we want to shop.
Yeah,
ultimately,
it's exactly the same, isn't it? As Bobbie, you all know, the pure online agents.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a place for it, but it's not taken anywhere near the market share they thought it would. It's caused the collapse of some companies and perhaps close to collapse of others, because people want that experience. They're spending, in some cases, millions of pounds. And you just don't want to do that with a click, do you? You want a nice brochure, you want a good conversation, you want somebody holding your hand that's going to take you through the process.
I think it's a personality thing too. I mean, you just lose the personality online. There is no, you just look, when you have to speak live chats, and there's a lot of technology does work in many instances, but however, in the property, I think that traditional way is also, you can infuse both together, but to have one singular, I can't see that working.
No.
I mean, and obviously it's.
I mean, there's probably a niche, like there's a niche for auctions, in the property world, but it's to a level and quite a specific one, I think. Okay, Bobbie, your question. Do the panel think that with the cost of living crisis getting worse by the minute, the government will introduce protection for private residential renters, similar to the commercial protections that were introduced for businesses during the COVID crisis, which I think now have finished, haven't they? If I'm not right, yeah.
Personally, I don't think they will. I don't think so.
I don't think they should.
And I don't think they should. Exactly, Stephen. I think they've got plenty of protection, and they've had it for a very long time. And I think, for any investor, landlords, it's very hard. The protection, I think the regulations and everything that's been stipulated to the landlords and investors, it's almost like going through a minefield. Whereas with the tenant, it's okay. You know, they're the worse off, but they're not the worse off because they're getting decent accommodation, they're paying for it, and when we want it back, we want it back.
Well,
and then they can go and find alternative accommodation according to their budget and their price bracket. So I think protection for the tenants, I mean, you can only take it to a certain extent, but then you've got to say sometimes, hang on, the landlords, there's people with properties that are also struggling to get their evictions done, losing rent, and there's that side of the argument where we need to also, I think, needs to be also looked at.
I mean, over the years, I've seen so many arguments about residential property sort of leases and things. I have this ethos which just says, look, your landlord's produced the lease, he obviously likes it, you've read it and signed it, you obviously like it, so why don't you just both do what it says in the lease? And it's the moment you try and deviate from that lease that the problems come. Yes. But we should be thankful that we do have the assured short-hold tenancies that were brought in the late 80s, because they do give exactly what they say: surety to the tenant for a period of time and surety to the landlord for a period of time. And that seems to me to be wholly reasonable and correct, and brings it closer to the commercial world, doesn't it? Where that's your contract, stick to it.
Yeah.
You're in then and you're out then.
Exactly. Kirsty mentioned while we were sitting outside about the commercial element, where to get a commercial tenant out, the legal side to get them out is not as vigorous as a residential side. So, and that's where the difference, I think, is on that front with the commercial and the residential sector with the tenants.
Yeah, I mean, I would say landlords have a lot more control in commercial than they do of their own investments in residential. And personally, I feel that rather than implementing some sort of rent control to help tenants, what actually would be more impactful is to reduce some of the legislation and burden on landlords. Because what's actually happening is that a lot of landlords are choosing to sell properties and no longer rent them out to tenants because it's becoming unprofitable and too much work. And then rents are having to go up because demand is going up, and so demand is pushing rents up. Yeah. And actually the government will be better focused on how to provide enough rental properties and who to work with as landlords than bringing in some rent controls.
Exactly. I think they need to do assisting the landlords more than assisting the tenants now. I think they need to look at it in a different...
Bobbie, I don't know about assisting the landlords more, but there needs to be more balance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's about, I think. Okay, well, on that happy note, we'll end the show. So a big thank you to Bobbie Jethwa and Kirsty Darkins. Thank you very much for coming both of you. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.